Thank you. I'll call this special regional council meeting of May 19th to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is being recorded and streamed on a publicly accessible website. Are there any council additions? Any CAO additions?
No, Mayor.
No mayor additions. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Penny. Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Motion is carried. The agenda is adopted. We have motion to adopt the minutes of the Special Regional Council meeting of April 17th, Special Regional Council April 21st, Special Regional Council April 28th, Special Regional Council May 1st, and Special Regional Council of May 5th. Can I get a motion to adopt those minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Dolan. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising. Mr. Berry, a brief update on the COVID-19.
Thank you, Mayor. BC provincial state of emergency has been extended to the end of day May 26th. Province announced last week that students can voluntarily return to class part-time beginning on June 1st. So it looks like kindergarten to grades 5 up to 50% of the time, and grades 6 to 12, 20% of the time. Both the campgrounds opened last week prior to the long weekend and just in time for the snow. As we transition as an organization to phase 2 of BC's restart plan, we're working, of course, on our own restart and go forward plan. There's an admin report on today's agenda, of course, that outlines some general, bit of a general approach. And as has been the case lately, a significant amount of information has been flowing in relating to the restart plan in the province. And as such, we've received information also since that admin report was published. So WorkSafe, for example, just released guidelines on Friday with tools to assist employers in the transition. Generally, employers are required to develop a COVID-19 safety plan that outlines the policies, guidelines, and procedures that they would need to put, or that they would put in place to reduce the risk of the transmission. And the plan follows 6 steps outlined in a returning to safe operation. So the provincial order requires a safety plan to be posted at the workplace and on our website. So we're working, of course, on that in the background. And the areas we're focusing on, of course, is town hall. So the transition of employees back into the workplace and what that looks like. Additionally, the opening of town hall to the public. Outdoor spaces, we're expecting some information in terms of outdoor spaces being playgrounds and things, hopefully sometime this week. And of course, the rec center is another area that we'll be focused on, which will most likely take a considerable amount of time to plan the opening to make sure everything's in line with what the provincial requirements are. Also, as we transition into a new normal and work towards safe resumption of some of the operations that have been either reduced or shut down, the daily update that's currently being provided will now for this week we provide it twice this week. So today and Thursday, and then starting next week we'll go to a weekly update for council. Just as we shift capacity into some other areas. Any pertinent information that comes out that would need to be shared, obviously, with council, we get that shared in a timely manner, of course. But the typical updates that you currently see daily will be reduced starting this week to today and Thursday, and then next week, the week. And that's it for now.
So all the information that we have on the opening up of businesses, we're sharing with the Chamber of Commerce to assist the members of the Chamber of Commerce with information that they might need to open their businesses.
We're going to provide some links and things of that nature on our website that they can access, that businesses can access, the public can access in terms of what we're doing, safe operating procedures, things of that nature.
Good. Are there any questions, councillors, for Mr. Berry? Hearing none, we'll move on to petitions. Mrs. Bev Vandersteen, Fort Nelson District Chamber of Commerce. Visitor Info Center Operations. Take it away, Mrs. Vandersteen.
Thank you so much for letting me chat with you today. Scott, is it okay if I share my screen?
Sure.
Does that work? I don't have much that I've put up here, but I'll just throw it up on the screen. If you bear with me for a second. I think I clicked the right one. There we go. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about moving towards reopening the visitor center. Apologize if I look away from you because I'm also trying to read some notes I have to make sure I don't miss what I wanted to communicate. I think we're getting close to the point where we can consider this now. Currently, I have one full-time staff member here, Hannah, and looking at hiring 2 more. I did just get on Friday notification from Canada Summer Jobs that we have 2 funded for 8 weeks. So that's good news. And then just maybe a little bit of background. So even though we've been closed, we have been continuing to provide travel services for people that are coming through or that are needing information. So we have the email and social media up and running, phone lines, of course. And what we've been doing with the phone is also call forwarding it so we can actually answer it 24/7 essentially. And then we have Wi-Fi enabled 24/7 as well, so people can access that. It reaches right to the kind of edge of the parking lot, doesn't go much further than that, but we have several times found people sitting at the picnic table or here using the Wi-Fi. And we've also placed a rack outside the doors, so we've got some information packages for north and south routes, as well as some other, our own travel pamphlet and that kind of thing. So people have been able to access information. But as we look towards reopening, as CAO Barry just mentioned, WorkSafe BC has now published their guidelines, and that includes retail spaces. And the visitor center actually was never ordered to close by the province. So I think that looking at the situation here, while we do obviously service the traveling public, we also service our local residents. And in providing both information for traveling they want to do and information on our region, but also from a retail perspective, we provide that connection to local artists. There's not very many venues in town where local artists can have their wares in a retail space. So I think that's also an important consideration. We're, of course, seeing the province still not encourage people to travel very far away from their homes. But I think as we move through this phase 2 and into phase 3, we're going to see more locals, and I say locals loosely, Fort St. John, Dawson Creek, Alberta. Those, we're receiving quite a few phone calls from individuals in those locales wanting to come north. So that said, we obviously would have to put a WorkSafe plan in place. We're going to have policies and procedures to keep our staff safe, and there's probably going to be the need for some equipment purchases. So things like a shield in front of the retail counter where the till is, some kind of a barrier, sanitizer stations, cleaning supplies, and then intent to work with Harvey Woodland here at the rec center as well. We have a meeting later this week to discuss, if we are getting people into the building, what does that look like? And can the rec center provide any assistance, particularly with the sanitizing of washrooms in the visitor center? Because that's a piece that we've kind of tagged as being a concern. Moving forward, as we get those policies and procedures in place, the intent would be to limit the number. Oh, I should not just make you guys look at this. I should actually change it. Little details. Limiting the hours of operation. So perhaps not going, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week immediately, but more looking at maybe a Tuesday through Saturday kind of situation that we can handle with staff, and limit the number of people in the visitor center at any one time. It's a pretty large space, but to keep staff safe and comfortable, sort of initial thoughts are around a maximum of about 10 people in the VIC at any one time. And we would just encourage people to get, if there was a lineup, which I don't really anticipate, honestly, encouraging people to get their stuff and then and then head out so the next group could get in. We're also talking about things like Wi-Fi, people having to use their own devices. I am looking at removing the public computers unless we could find some kind of screening or plastic cover for the keyboards. The touch screen would also get put away, as well as the coffee station, just those high touch points. Again, we would need some of those equipment around barriers for the counters and sanitizing of washrooms. And then as well, we would look at the table spacing in the back end of the visitor center, probably only 2 tables, you know, for those people that do need to spend a little bit of time connecting. But I think it's doable. And so with council's approval, we would aim to look at getting those policies, everything in place and modifications made. I could put a plan in front of whoever you tell me to, I guess. And then would hopefully be looking for probably mid-June to actually open doors, because I think it will take a couple of weeks and we're basically almost at June now. And that's kind of my presentation. So I will stop sharing my screen and just ask council if you have any questions or thoughts or concerns.
I have a couple of questions, Mrs. Vandersteen. The cleaning of the washrooms, is that the responsibility of the Visitor Information Center, or is it the responsibility of the rec center?
Usually in the summer months. So in the winter months, the rec center takes over it when we don't have the additional staff here. But usually during the summer months, the visitor center staff would handle that. The question is around proper sanitizing of it, and I just wanted to check with Harvey around whether or not the ozone sanitation could happen. And I don't know what his capacity is, so that would form part of the plan once we got that far.
The other question I have is, you know, although the Northern Rockies region municipality is the landlord of the premises, I don't think landlords have much input into when or if a business opens, like the Vic Center, other than we have to make sure that our rec center as a whole meets with the provincial guidelines. Mr. Barry, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. Bev is talking about opening mid-June with council's approval, but she doesn't really require council's approval, does she?
Well, from a landlord perspective, no, but at the same time, council does fund the visitor center operations, so they can give some guidance in terms of what they want to. Council can give guidance in terms of what they'd want to see and how.
Yep.
So it's I think a worthwhile approach to communicate what the plans are and to discuss that to see if there are any concerns of council, for sure.
Okay, I was just wondering how this was coming to us and why, but that gives us some clarification. Councilors, are there any other questions for Mrs. Vandersteen? Councilor Roper.
Thanks very much for that presentation, Bev. Sounds like a very good plan. As far as the equipment that you're going to need, sanitizing stations and extra cleaning supplies, is that within your budget, or are you going to be looking for some extra funds to get those things off the ground?
So yes, no, it's not really within my normal budget. But that said, I don't think I'm going to be seeing a normal budget at least roll out. Like I'm seeing a normal budget come from council. Thank you very much, but I'm not seeing the same expenses and the same rollout of what I'm going to spend. So I think there is some room in the visitor center current budget, as long as I'm able to kind of slide money from one category to another. So I don't expect to be coming to council for extra money for the purpose of this.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I believe council is in favor of you opening the visitor info center, as soon as possible, provided it keeps within the provincial guidelines. Are there any objections to that? Very well, Mr. Barry, we don't need a
Mayor, I just have a question. Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute. I do have just a question, or maybe a point to think about. Are we thinking that the visitor center can be open before the rec center as a whole is open, or would we be thinking about opening both facilities in tandem?
Mr. Barry?
We haven't given any consideration to that, to be honest with you, on our end just yet. Councillor Grewing, we don't know really what the scope looks like in terms of opening the full rec facility just yet, because we're still waiting for information from the province and from WorkSafe. I think there'd probably be significantly more challenges of opening the rec facility as a whole versus Bev being able to open the visitor center. So if we had the ability to do so, then sure, it would make sense. But at the same time, I really don't have an answer for that right now based on the information that's flowing down from the province and what the rec center piece looks like as a whole, for example.
Yeah, so I know that Bev wants to address this too, but I just, before she does, just encouraging council to think about how we feel about one portion of the center being open and not the other, because I can sort of see the Vic Center being ready to open before the rec center as a whole.
Mrs. Vandersteen?
Yeah, so thank you. I think that we can open before the rec center, is my personal opinion. But that would be part of my conversation with Harvey on Thursdays to see what kind of concerns he might have. And I think the only concern that really comes to mind, because we are definitely separate from the rec center as well, is just the one set of doors down at that end. I would have to barricade so that people aren't exiting into the rec center. Because right now those are egress doors, anybody could open them. So we would have to find some kind of fix for that. I don't think it means anything in terms of, and again, I'll touch base with everybody necessary, in terms of emergency evacuation or any of that kind of thing if something was to happen within the facility, because I have enough doors and egresses within the visitor center itself. We don't need to access the rec center for that. So I do have a meeting set up with Harvey for Thursday and would expect that we can discuss all of those kinds of points.
Okay. Mr. Barry, we're looking for a resolution then from council for this?
Not necessarily, never hurts to do a resolution, but to show council support, if you wish.
So I'll ask for a resolution that we support the Chamber of Commerce ambitions to open mid-June, while in keeping with the provincial guidelines, etc.
I'll make that resolution.
Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Vandersteen, for your presentation.
Is it all right if I just stay on, because I believe I'd like to speak to the NDIT part of the meeting as well?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mini report number 36, third quarter grant and aid requests. The two grant and aid requests be approved. Are there any questions regarding the Northern Rockies Triathlon and Northern Rockies Food Bank? I'm sorry, Fort Nelson Food Bank for a request for grant and aid? Very well. Did you want to comment on this, Mr. Barry, or this is pretty well straightforward? Very well. I'll ask for a motion then that we allow the grant and aid for those two organizations. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on, admin report number 37, Northern Development Initiative Trust Regional Business Liaison Program. That the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality support an application from the Fort Nelson and District Chamber of Commerce for the Northern Development Initiative Trust program within the Northeast Regional account. Ms. Vandersteen, did you want to speak to this?
Sorry,
yes, we have several Vandersteens.
Is that Miss or Mrs.?
Well, well, now there. I'm going to go with Miss Vandersteen first, and then we will go to Mrs. Vandersteen. So take it away, Miss Vandersteen.
Sounds great. Thank you. So this program is a new program that's being offered by Northern Development Initiative Trust. It just rolled out maybe 2 weeks ago, we saw it. And the Chamber of Commerce has indicated that they're interested in applying and hosting a regional business liaison position. The program does cover the costs of the employee, but does not cover much else outside of that. So that is indicated in the report, what is and isn't covered. So there would be some cost to the Chamber of Commerce for hosting the position. The program, the position would really be aimed at one-on-one communication with businesses to be a bit of a listening ear. A lot of what we've been doing through the Business Talks survey program that we're in the process of, helping them potentially one-on-one with any applications that they might need for the various programming that's rolling out provincially and federally. And then as an additional, as time allows, they would be able to help with programming that is specific to assisting businesses through these hard times, and recover through into at least the first stage of the recovery stage, depending on when that actually rolls out. And is a really good connection to the working group that we have already established between a lot of the economic development staff on the NRRM, as well as the Chamber of Commerce, moving forward and through these unprecedented times. So I'm here for any other questions that people may have.
Are there any questions, councillors, for Ms. Vandersteen?
Yeah, I have a question, please.
Councillor Gerwin, go ahead.
Would this be an additional or / new position added to the chamber roster, or would it be, if the grant was received, would it be like somebody that's currently on the chamber payroll? Does that make sense?
Yes, and no, I would see this as an addition, as a project coordinator specific to doing that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mrs. Vandersteen, did you want to speak to this application as well, or?
I think Krista pretty much covered it. The only thing is I do find with some of these NDIT grants that there isn't, especially for not-for-profits, they're not necessarily designed to cover other costs. So it is strictly the wages, but I think it's really important that we have this piece available to businesses, and I think it could take some of the pressure off of other not-for-profits if we have somebody that can sit down face to face with businesses and deal with them. And I think that in terms of being able to do that safely, we can make a few modifications in my boardroom where if they had to be, I'll call it hands-on or a little bit more face to face, that we could do that. So it's unlikely I'm going to be using the boardroom for board meetings anytime soon. So I think we can facilitate that here without incurring too much extra cost.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mrs. Vandersteen?
I'd like to just make one more comment, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Gerwin.
I think wondering how council would feel about the municipality providing in-kind support if the grant is received. I don't know in terms, because not much else is covered beside wages, so there will be some additional cost to the chamber, who has been severely affected, or their financial capacity has been severely affected by what's been going on. So I don't know what it could look like. So, but just, if there was like hardware that we could supply, or paper, or I don't really know, even just technical support or whatever, if council could just think about if that would be a possibility.
So I think the Chamber of Commerce and the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality have a good working relationship as far as, helping each other out. But maybe Mrs. Vandersteen could tell us what additional things are required besides wages for this person. What would we be looking at if we decided to help out?
Well, so off the top of my head, there's going to have to be some kind of barrier put up, probably on the tables. There's going to be a cost attached to doing that. I have to look at our technical equipment. If I'm moving the computers out of the visitor center because we can't have visitors and staff handling them safely, they could probably just transition in. So kind of going to walk through all of those plans if council is at the very beginning stages right now of just considering that application. So if council provides the resolution of support for the application, then we would look further into those details. And I could come
Okay.
back to the council if there was a requirement.
Thank you. In that case, I'm going to ask for a motion for the recommendation.
I'd make
Can I
that
get a
motion.
mover? Moved by Councillor Gerwing, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vandersteen. Admin report number 38, resuming safe operations of the municipal services. Mr. Barry?
I'll pass it on to, for Erin. She can,
Mrs. LaBelle?
we'll tag team this one a little bit if need be.
Thank you, Mayor. Contained in the report is a brief outline of the province's four-phase plan for restarting the province. Sorry. Oh. Okay, sorry. Thanks, Jay. And in the fourth phase plan, the province has identified that we're currently sitting in phase 1 with all of those sectors being able to operate. They've identified phase 2 as mid-May and onwards. Many of what the municipality functions in terms of services fall into the phase 2, including office-based work sites, recreation, sports, parks, and outdoor spaces. One of the interesting focuses in phase 2 is childcare. So what does fall under childcare are our summer programs. So our summer fun program as an opportunity for childcare services to allow essential workers to return to work. So we expect that the guidelines to be able to safely operate a summer camp program will probably come out fairly shortly. And it will sort of outline how we can perhaps safely start our summer fun program or other potential childcare opportunities. As CAO Barry mentioned, each of these different guidelines are coming out from both the province and from WorkSafe BC. One of the things that they've highlighted in many of their reports is that although we have not been mandated to close many of our operations, we were unable to safely operate. So now the province is going to be providing us with the instructions on how we can safely operate. And in addition, WorkSafe has said that we must have worker protections in place before we can open, but we don't have to have the final safe operating plan completed before we can open. So we can, once we've got some of the main worker safety barriers, things like that in place, we will be able to open or offer some limited services while we are continuing to work on our overall safe operating plan. So that's good that we don't have to have that fully completed before we can open. So as CAO Barry mentioned, we're starting to work on the town hall safe operating plan so that we can have that one opened fairly quickly in light of tax bills are going to be heading out here pretty soon. So we want to make sure that we've got every opportunity for residents and businesses to ask any questions they may have or to come and seek some advice or assistance. So were there any questions?
Councilors, any questions? I have a question. Do we have any visibility here on when that will happen? How long will it be before we open the doors to the municipality, and maybe some idea, plus or minus a couple of weeks, about the rec center?
In terms of town hall, CEO Barry and I spoke this morning, and our goal is broadly, we're going for June 1st.
Okay.
It will depend most on our ability to obtain supplies. So in terms of barrier protection for the workers, it has to be our first priority for the front counter. We have to be able to have that barrier in place. And then second is the workers themselves. We need to make sure that their physical space that they work in is they're adequately physically distanced. In terms of the rec center, I have no idea. That guideline has not yet come out from the province, so we don't know what it's going to contain.
Sure, okay.
And
Mr. Berry.
and most likely the rec center probably be more than one process for the rec facility, considering our rec facility encompasses a lot of various different things with arenas and walking track, the pool, and things like that, right? So it might be, again, the facility might be open, and certain aspects of the facility itself might still be closed, even if the facility is open. So those things we're not quite sure what that looks like yet, as mentioned previously. And is a BC Recs and Parks Association have provided some guidance and information for the province, which suppose we get in past the province tomorrow, the 20th, and we're not quite sure what that turnaround time is to provide the guidance to the various municipalities. For town hall, for example, when we look at town hall, the very first thing we look at from a worker safety perspective is eliminating the hazard. So what can we do to actually eliminate it, which still means the rotation, most likely in remote working of some employees to reduce the exposure levels within the building here. And I think when you can't eliminate the hazard, then you look at engineering controls, which would be protective barriers, for example, and then administrative controls, which are the rules and guidelines, safe operating procedures, simple things, even how to operate a microwave or a POS machine would need to have an operating guideline in terms of frequency of sanitation, things of that nature. And then the last level, of course, of protection is PPE, right? So all that is factored in when we build, when we open up the facility and look at what that looks like. We'll be bringing something back to council to discuss hours of operations, if it would possibly be restricted still. And then additionally, where would the public be able to access? And that possibly would be a phased approach also. So the initial open would be to access the front lobby to pay bills or to meet with various people within the organization if required, but not having the ability to access the full facility, for example, as the public. Additionally, the fire hall, public works, and the airport, for example, most likely at the start would still be restricted to public access, and we channel everything through town hall. Again, it's all around being able to maintain the business continuity, the safe work of the employees, and to provide those essential services. So all that's being factored in as we look at what that looks like.
Okay, are there any other questions? Very well. Thank you, Mrs. Laval, for the report. Received for information, council information package of May 13th, 2020. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Roper, seconded by Councilor Penny. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Have a great day, everybody.
You bet.
Take care.